Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, November 7, 2025. Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer makes a new offer to Republicans to end the federal government shutdown, and it includes a one-year extension of expiring Affordable Care Act health insurance premium tax credits. U.S. Agriculture Department says it is working to comply with a federal judge's order to fully fund the SNAP food aid program for November, even as the administration is appealing the judge's ruling. More than 1,000 flights across the country canceled as the Federal Aviation Administration begins to cut 4% of flights, ramping up to 10% in the coming days due to air traffic controller staffing shortages during the government shutdown. Now at day 38. Also today, Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a staunch ally of President Donald Trump, announces she's running for New York governor. The current Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul is seeking re-election. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban visits the White House and asks President Trump for an exemption to sanctions for Russian oil imports. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announces changes to how the Pentagon buys weapons, saying the goal is to operate on a wartime footing, rapidly accelerate capabilities, focus on results, and build an arsenal of democracy. All that and more coming up on Washington Today. CNBC writing the top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer on Friday offered a new plan to Republican lawmakers that would allow the U.S. government to reopen from a shutdown that began October 1st. Schumer's proposal calls for Democrats to agree to pass a so-called clean resolution that would provide short-term funding for government operations. In exchange, the New York lawmaker said Republicans would agree to a separate one-year extension of existing enhanced tax credits that are used to reduce the cost of health insurance purchased on Affordable Care Act marketplaces. The other leg of the deal calls for the establishment of a bipartisan committee to continue negotiations on long-term reforms to address the issue of health care affordability. Schumer's offer drops the long-standing Democratic demand that the short-term funding resolution include an extension of the enhanced ACA subsidies, which are due to expire at the end of December. That demand has prevented a Republican House clean resolution bill from reaching the 60 votes it needs to pass in the Senate. Reporting from CNBC, Chuck Schumer made his offer on the Senate floor.
After so many failed votes, it's clear we need to try something different. What the Senate is doing isn't working for either party and isn't working for the American people. Democrats have said we must address the health care crisis, but Republicans have repeatedly said they won't negotiate to lower the health care costs until the government reopens. So let's find a path to honor both positions. Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three. I've spoken with my caucus, and Democrats are offering a very simple compromise. Democrats are ready to clear the way to quickly pass a government funding bill that includes health care affordability. Leader Thune just needs to add a clean one-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs. That's not a negotiation. It's an extension of current law, something we do all the time around here, as we all know. But we also offer this. Let's create a bipartisan committee that will continue negotiations after the government reopens on reforms, ahead of next year's enrollment period, to provide long-term certainty that health care costs will be more affordable. This proposal reopens the government and ensures working families who are shopping right now for their health care get certainty and financial relief. While open enrollment has begun, insurers can update their rates after we pass a simple extension of the tax credits. With this approach, we do not negotiate health care in the shutdown, as Leader Thune has maintained he wishes, and the American people get the tax credit extension they want. That is what many of our Republican colleagues have floated over the last 6 weeks is a compromise, a one-year tax credit extension and reforms to the credit beyond that. We will agree with the Republican request not to start negotiations until after the government reopens. All Republicans have to do is say yes to extend current law for 1 year. It makes sense. And since what we're proposing is only a simple extension of current law, the Senate could do this within a few hours. This is a reasonable offer that reopens the government, deals with health care affordability, and begins a process of negotiating reforms to the ACA tax credits for the future. Now, the ball is in the Republicans' court. We need Republicans to just say yes.
The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, Friday afternoon on the Senate floor. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, responding. CBS News reporting that he tells CBS that the Democratic proposal is a non-starter as GOP lawmakers entered a conference meeting near the Senate chamber. He said, "I think everybody who follows this knows it's a non-starter. There is no way. The Obamacare extension is the negotiation. That's what we're going to negotiate once the government opens up. But a one-year extension along the lines of what they're suggesting, I think everybody knows there, and without Hyde protections, it doesn't even get close." CBS notes that he's referring to the Hyde Amendment, which restricts federal funding for abortion. They quote Thune going on, "We need to vote to open the government, and there is a proposal out there to do that, and then we can have this whole conversation about health care." Again, reporting from CBS News. Senator Thune entered today saying that he wanted to take a vote on a combination of the same short-term clean CR that has failed over 10 times in the past, added to that a package of 3 full-year appropriations bills: military construction, Veterans Affairs, Department of Agriculture, and the legislative branch. He was hoping to get enough Democrats to reach 60 on that. Senator Thune spoke on the Senate floor this morning. This was before Senator Schumer made his latest offer about the government shutdown, Day 38, and those Obamacare tax credits.
Please don't tell me they're fighting for some greater good for the American people. If Democrats can be said to be fighting for anyone at all besides themselves, they are fighting for a fraction of a fraction, for a tiny percentage of the small percentage of Americans who are on Obamacare. The number of people they're supposedly fighting for is dwarfed, and I say dwarfed, Mr. President, by the number of people whose lives and livelihoods they are damaging. And as for the claim that Democrats got some kind of mandate from the American people on Tuesday to continue jeopardizing food stamps for 40 million Americans in need, give me a break. Democrats performed well in 3 states where Democrats often perform well. Congratulations. I really don't think that means that the American people have all signed up to be democratic socialists. And it sure as heck doesn't provide a good reason for making 40 million Americans go hungry. Mr. President, I would like to think that the junior senator from Connecticut doesn't represent all Senate Democrats. But if there are Senate Democrats out there who do still care about hardworking Americans and not just Democrats' election prospects, the time to act is now. Not when the far left decides this exercise can be over. Not when federal workers are lining up at food banks for their Thanksgiving meal. Now. Today. I hope, Mr. President, there are at least 5 more Democrats out there with a backbone who will vote with us to reopen the government and end these weeks of misery for the American people.
The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, on the Senate floor early this morning. And since then, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, has made an offer that at the moment the Senate Republicans are rejecting a one-year extension of those ACA enhanced tax credits. Senator Thune telling reporters off the floor that the Senate will likely work through the weekend on ending the government shutdown, although he didn't say when votes might be taking place. And today, President Donald Trump posting the United States Senate should not leave town until they have a deal to end the Democrat shutdown. If they can't reach a deal, the Republicans should terminate the filibuster immediately and take care of our great American workers. Senator Thune referred to the junior senator from Connecticut. That is Chris Murphy, a Democrat. He was interviewed on the Punch Bowl podcast Fly Out Day on Thursday. And here is a bit of that. He explained how the results of Tuesday's elections, where Democrats saw victories in Virginia, New York, New Jersey, and California, he says encouraged his party to continue to advocate for the positions they are pushing for during this government shutdown.
The Democratic Party looks powerful for the first time all year. We looked pretty damn weak for most of 2025. Trump was running over us, and we weren't showing the willingness to stand up and fight. And so it's not coincidental that during this 5-week period of time where we've been standing up and saying, listen, we're not signing on to a budget that is fundamentally immoral, that kicks millions of people off of health care, that you saw a lot of folks who might have stayed home otherwise turn out in these states. So, yeah, I don't think you want to overhype that part of the analysis. This is probably as would be normal, a referendum on the incumbent president. But I think it'd be a real mistake to not read this election as an endorsement of Democrats' decision for the first time to fight in the last 4 weeks.
Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, on the Punch Bowl News podcast Fly Out Day, posted Thursday. President Donald Trump spoke about the government shutdown today and also the economy in general. AP writes that President Trump is adjusting his messaging strategy to win over voters who are worried about the cost of living, with plans to emphasize new tax breaks and show progress on fighting inflation. The messaging is centered around affordability, and the push comes after inflation emerged as a major vulnerability for Trump and Republicans in Tuesday's elections, in which voters overwhelmingly said the economy was their biggest concern. That was the article from Associated Press. Here is President Trump at the White House.
I just saw that Walmart came out with a statement last night. They've done it for many years, that Thanksgiving this year will cost 25% less than Thanksgiving last year under Sleepy Joe Biden. So that's a big difference. That's a big difference. 25% less Thanksgiving. And I think that's a very good chart. They include everything that you need for Thanksgiving. So it's 25% less this year than it was last year. And that's true. That's emblematic of the rest of prices. Energy prices are way down from what they were last year. Inflation is almost non-existent. We have inflation down to a very low number, whereas Biden, as you know, is the worst inflation in the history of our country. So we're doing very well. We have a shutdown, as you probably know, because the Democrats have gone, they're crazy. They're crazy. But they don't care if they hurt the country. But we've approved it 14 times. We've approved opening up 14 times, and they keep rejecting it. And I guess maybe they will again. Let's see what happens. They want to have a lot of bad things happen, bad things for our country. We're not going to give $1.5 trillion to people that came into our country illegally. We're not going to do it. To people who came from prisons, they came from mental institutions, they're drug dealers. They want to give them medical care. $1.5 trillion. And we're not going to do other things that they're requesting also.
President Donald Trump at the White House. It was part of his opening statement as he met with the visiting Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Reuters, writing about that Walmart advertisement he mentioned, asked about the issue of high prices, which hurt Trump's Republican Party in Tuesday's elections in some states. Trump referred several times to a recent Walmart advertisement. Trump said Walmart said that the Thanksgiving was 25% more expensive under Biden. Reuters goes on, the White House has also posted on X about the Walmart advertisement. A reporter in the meeting told Trump that this year's Thanksgiving meal from Walmart, while cheaper, contains less items. Trump said he hadn't heard that and asked the reporter what news outlet she was from. When she said NBC, he called her fake news. Reporting from Reuters. From Politico, the Trump administration told states Friday it is working to comply with a federal court order to pay full November food stamp benefits during the government shutdown, according to a memo obtained by Politico. USDA wrote in the memo that later today it will complete the processes necessary to make funds for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program available. The move comes after the Trump administration asked the First Circuit Court of Appeals for an emergency stay of a lower court's order to pay full November SNAP benefits. Justice Department lawyers argued in the filing that U.S. District Judge John McConnell Jr.'s decision was misguided and is likely to be overturned on appeal. Nearly 42 million Americans rely on SNAP, which ran out of funding November 1st, while the Trump administration has agreed to tap an emergency fund to pay partial SNAP benefits. It has previously argued it cannot legally use a separate bucket of money to fully fund the billions needed for the program. That was from Politico. President Trump was asked about the judge's order Thursday night at the White House. It was during an unrelated event, and he asked Vice President J.D. Vance to answer.
A federal judge said tonight that the administration has to fully fund SNAP. It's the latest in the back and forth, and the Justice Department said they're going to appeal it. What's your message to folks as they work this out in the courts and in Congress as we're heading into Thanksgiving?
You want to go with it?
Yeah, look, Jackie, it's an absurd ruling because you have a federal judge effectively telling us what we have to do in the midst of a Democrat government shutdown, which what we'd like to do is for the Democrats to open up the government. Of course, then we can fund SNAP, and we can also do a lot of other good things for the American people. But in the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation. We're trying to keep as much turned on. We're trying to keep as much going as possible. The president and the entire administration are working on that, but we're not going to do it under the orders of a federal judge. We're going to do it according to what we think we have to do to comply with the law, of course, but also to actually make the government work for people in the midst of the Democrat government shutdown. If they would like to end this, we would welcome working with them to end this government shutdown, and then we wouldn't have to triage what we're going to fund and what we're not going to fund. And the last thing that I'll say is the American people are unfortunately about to start suffering some very real consequences because of the shutdown. In the past, when you had a government shutdown, you would have under the Obama administration, they would lean into all of the problems it was going to cause for the American people at the beginning of the shutdown. The president has told us to keep as much going as humanly possible, but after 30 days of this thing, 40 days of this thing, you're going to start seeing very real travel delays. That's because the Democrat government shut down. You're going to start seeing SNAP benefits run out. That's because the Democrat government shut down. They should stop this charade and open up the government. That's what we want them to do. We've been asking them to do it for 40 days. It's time.
Vice President J.D. Vance Thursday night at the White House. North Carolina was one of the states that filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration to force the use of SNAP emergency funds during the government shutdown. North Carolina's Attorney General Jeff Jackson, the Democrat, spoke today at the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina in the capital city, Raleigh.
Once the Department of Agriculture announced that they were effectively zeroing out SNAP, we took them to court. We won. Now we're just fighting over what the remedy is going to look like. They have said they're going to provide 50% payments. We're asking them to provide full payments. What I need folks to know that as of 5 a.m. this morning, that payment did start to hit people's EBT cards. So whereas some other states are having a little more difficulty with processing, NCDHHS has been working around the clock, and they were able to get those payments out as of today. So there was a brief interruption in service for a matter of a few days, but people are seeing funds on their EBT card, not 100%, but roughly 50%. Some are seeing a little bit more. Some folks are seeing up to 65% payment on their card, depending on their overall eligibility. But the average that folks are seeing right now is a 50% payment. Again, we are in court asking the judge to impose a full payment. We'll see what happens with that lawsuit. We are here today because no matter what happens in court today or tomorrow, we are going to see record demand this month at food banks like this one all across the state. And so we are asking people to please step up, be especially generous with your local food banks, including this one, and do what you can. If you can volunteer, that's great. But if you can just write a check, that is fantastic. Their money goes farther than yours when it comes to buying food. They can get a lot more food for the same dollar than you can, so consider just going online and making a donation to these folks. That is what they need the most right now, is a monetary donation from you so that they can buy the food they need to at a reduced rate and to provide it to the surge of demand that they're seeing right now.
North Carolina's Attorney General Jeff Jackson, a Democrat, today at a food bank in Raleigh, North Carolina. From the Hill, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said Friday that flight reductions could go as high as 20% if the government shutdown drags on, as the Federal Aviation Administration begins reducing flights by 10% due to air traffic controller staffing shortages. He spoke at a Breitbart News event in Washington, D.C. on Friday. The Hill notes that Duffy clarified after the event that he was speaking theoretically. This morning, Secretary Duffy spoke to reporters at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport.
By the decisions that we've made today to start the decrease in capacity, starting today at 4%, we're going to get up to 10%. Many of you have reported on that. But I want to hear about the passenger experience. What can we do better? And get their feedback. I think that's always important to hear from the experience of the American traveling public. Now, this morning I talked about why is this happening? And I've had a lot of questions about the data. And I necessarily didn't want to give the data because some people might say, well, you're at 10%, it should be at 15%. Others might say it should be at 5%. It is not a science, it is an art that we're trying to deploy to keep people safe in the airspace. And we're trying to be, we're trying to prevent the pressure that we now see building in the system. There's a very easy solution. Let's open the government up. Let's pay our controllers and reduce the pressure. That's not happening. The Senate actually is going home this weekend. As many people here can't get home, the Senate goes home. They should be here every day, every weekend, every week trying to find a deal so we can open the government back up.
Mr. Secretary.
I want to talk to you about the data. So first, some have asked what's happened in the airspace. So a few points that we look at that are sending us in the wrong direction. Right. So number one, loss of separation in the airspace. So that's the minimum distance we keep between aircraft to keep them safe. We've seen breaches, more breaches in regard to that loss of separation. We see more incursions on tarmacs throughout the country. And we have more complaints from pilots about stress from air traffic controllers and more complaints about the lack of responsiveness from controllers. So that data is going in the wrong direction, not in the right direction, which made us make the decision we have to actually take additional measures to reduce the pressure in our system.
The Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy speaking to reporters at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport on day 38 of the federal government shutdown. Wall Street today, the Dow up 74, NASDAQ down 49, S&P up 8. CNBC writing the jobs report Friday won't be happening again this week, as the record-long government shutdown has resulted in a lack of official data on the labor market, as well as a host of other important indicators. Had the Bureau of Labor Statistics released its monthly non-farm payroll report, economists surveyed by Dow Jones expect it would have shown a decline of 60,000 jobs and an unemployment rate increase to 4.5%. That was from CNBC. From the Washington Post, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington has been investigating a trip that D.C. Mayor Muriel E. Bowser and 4 aides took to Qatar in 2023, but the mayor is not a target, according to law enforcement and other administration officials. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said in a statement Friday, Mayor Bowser is not under investigation, nor is she the target of any investigation. Bowser and 4 staff members traveled to Qatar in December 2023 for meetings on economic development. The trip was partially paid for by the Qatari government. Such payments for travel are legal, but subject to restrictions. Reporting from the Washington Post, Mayor Bowser was asked today at a news conference about the trip and the reporting from Thursday from the New York Times and Axios that caused some confusion about a potential investigation.
I want to take it back to 2023. Can you explain your reasoning why you accepted $61,000 in travel from Qatar after it paid $4 billion to purchase 5% of Monumental Sports and Entertainment? Both appear now to be prohibited sources according to D.C. law. And then you brokered a $500 million deal to improve Capital One Arena with Monument and in part with Qatar?
Oh, I'm happy to talk about why we saved the Washington Capitals and the Washington Wizards for downtown Washington. It is anchoring our downtown comeback, and we're very pleased with that. So let me address your larger question that I've been talking to you about for 2 years. A business trip, a publicly noticed trip to promote Washington, D.C. in Qatar. That's what we did, and we don't have any bones about saying it. Anybody else? Yep.
Mayor, the New York Times is reporting that the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office has you under investigation. They're claiming a corruption investigation. Do you have a comment on that? And then I have a follow-up to that.
And Axios is reporting that I'm not under investigation. So make your question complete. I am not under investigation. I have not been contacted by any federal officials about investigating me.
And that's my follow-up, is that our sources are saying that there's been no subpoenas to your office, no one's been questioned in your office, that there's been no target letter, there's been no information indicating that there's even an investigation. Do you have a comment on that?
We haven't been contacted at all.
No subpoenas, no nothing?
No. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm wondering if you have contacted anyone in the White House or in the Justice Department to seek explanation for some of this conflicting reporting about the investigation, and if you have been made aware of anyone else in your administration who may be the subject or target of an investigation.
No. So I have checked our lawyers, and we have a regular kind of chain of who talks to who, and we have not been contacted, not related to me or to anybody else as I'm aware, and I have no explanation from federal officials about what happened. Sorry?
Have you sought one?
No, we haven't.
D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser answering reporters' questions today. More from the Washington Post article. 2 senior Trump administration officials said on Friday that Bowser has never been under investigation. Law enforcement officials typically do not comment on pending investigations. The denial in Bowser's case, however, follows an unusual series of events. This week, U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro intervened to try to prevent the firing of FBI agents whom FBI Director Kash Patel had dismissed. Patel fired the agents because of their past involvement in investigations of President Donald Trump. Pirro tried to prevent the firings because some of the agents were involved in investigations important to her office, including the investigation into the Qatar trip, according to a person knowledgeable about the matter who spoke on the condition of anonymity out of concern for retaliation. Once the existence of that investigation became public, administration officials began to downplay Bowser's potential involvement. That was from the Washington Post. U.S. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik begins an AP article. A close Republican ally of President Donald Trump announced Friday that she's running for governor of New York, a place she depicted in a campaign launch video as being in ashes because of lawlessness and a high cost of living. In her video, a narrator declares the Empire State has fallen as it painted a grim picture of crime and economic crisis in New York, though her message appeared to be aimed at other, more conservative parts of the state that she will need to win over next year. That was from Associated Press. Here is the second half of that video.
From the ashes of Kathy Hochul's failed policies, New York will rise, like we always do. The spirit of the Empire State cannot be broken. All we need is a courageous leader, ready for the fight. Elise Stefanik will make New York affordable and safe.
People in New York, no matter if you're a Republican, Independent, or Democrat, enough is enough. We are the most unaffordable state in the nation because of single-party Democrat rule led by Kathy Hochul.
As a working mom, congresswoman, and fighter, Elise knows families need more help, and she'll make New York affordable. That's why she authored and passed the largest middle-class tax cut in New York's history, letting working families keep more of their hard-earned money. Elise will reduce your energy, utility, and grocery bills. She fought woke insanity in our schools, stood proudly with law law enforcement, champions small businesses, and will never back down from fighting for New York families. With everything on the line, we need someone who will deliver results and make New York affordable and safe for families and small businesses to not just survive, but thrive.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican of New York, in a video announcing she's running for governor in 2026. Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat who is running for re-election, put out a response video.
Meet Elise Stefanik.
The greatest president in the history of our country, President Donald J. Trump.
She's Donald Trump's top ally in Congress.
I'm proud to be one of his top allies on Capitol Hill. This goes back to fighting against the witch hunt impeachment. It goes back to being the first member of Congress who endorsed him.
Now Elise Stefanik is running for governor of New York to do what she's always done, put Trump first.
She is phenomenal. She is a friend of mine.
Phenomenal at putting Trump ahead of you. Like when she proudly cast the deciding vote to pass Trump's agenda that rips healthcare away from 1.5 million New Yorkers.
She's doing me a big favor.
Stefanik put 5 rural hospitals in her district on the chopping block just to keep Trump happy.
And I have been proud to be President Trump's top ally in Congress.
She voted to greenlight Trump's tariffs, too, even though they're hurting New York farmers and jacking up costs on everything from groceries to coffee to building and owning a home. And when the Trump administration tried to cut $187 million in counterterrorism funds from New York, Elise Stefanik didn't raise a finger or say a word.
A video from New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul's re-election campaign. Both Hochul and Republican Elise Stefanik will need to win their party's election primaries first next June to get the nomination to face off in the general election next November. The last Republican-elected New York governor was George Pataki in 2002. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Fox News writing that President Donald Trump said Friday during a meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban he is considering granting an exemption on Russian oil sanctions to allow Hungary to purchase the resource from Russia. Article says after months of waffling between confrontation and conciliation toward Moscow, Trump imposed sanctions on Russia's 2 largest oil companies in October as the Kremlin backed off from talks to end the war with Ukraine. Reporting from Fox News, here's a question to the Hungarian Prime Minister and the President in the White House Cabinet Room.
Mr. Orban has requested an exemption as it relates to oil that is coming from Russia. Is that something that you are prepared to do? And may I ask Mr. Orban a question in regards to that very issue?
Sure. We're looking at it because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. As you know, they don't have the advantage of having sea. It's a great country. It's a big country, but they don't have sea. They don't have the ports. And so they have a difficult problem. There's another country that has that same problem, by the way. But when you look at what's happened with Europe, many of those countries, they don't have those problems, and they buy a lot of oil and gas from Russia. And as they know, I'm very disturbed by that because we're helping them and they're going and buying oil and gas from Russia. So that question could be really asked maybe more accurately if you talked about many European countries, not Hungary necessarily, because Hungary is in a different position. But many European countries are buying oil and gas from Russia, and they have been for years. And I say, what's that all about, right? Thank you.
So that will be one of the issues for today, to explain clearly what would be the consequences for the Hungarian people and for the Hungarian economy not to get oil and gas from Russia, because we are supplied by pipelines. pipeline is not an ideological or political issue. It's a physical reality because we don't have port, exactly as the President explained to you. So we will negotiate on that point. It's vital for us anyway.
Mr. Orban, there are two pipelines, as I understand it. There's a pipeline from Ukraine and there's a pipeline from Croatia. And my understanding is that the pipeline from Croatia can provide all of Hungary's energy needs. As a result, why would you need an exemption if that's the case?
Okay. So when we discuss that issue, you should separate the gas and the oil. On the gas issue, which is very important for us, 90% of the Hungarian households based on heating system based on gas. So we have only one pipeline delivering gas to Hungary, which is the main pipeline, the Turkish one. What we got from Croatia is a very small volume supplementary gas pipeline. Okay, that's gas. Oil is another issue. So oil is coming from the Druzhba pipeline, which is the main supply, and that is the Croatian one, which is the secondary and supplementary pipeline. We would like to convince the Croatian government to enlarge it and make it possible to deliver more. Under these circumstances, it cannot be the main pipeline. It's just supplementary. But later on, with some big investments, it could serve better the interest of Hungary.
In the White House Cabinet Room, President Donald Trump with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. New York Times writing about this meeting, Hungary imports 86% of its oil from Russia, an amount that has increased since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, according to the Atlantic Council research group in Washington. Without an exemption, Hungary could face secondary sanctions from the United States that could result in fines or being cut off from American financial institutions. Bloomberg News writing that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth challenged major U.S. defense contractors to speed up weapons development or fade away in a speech Friday before an audience of executives from major industry players and newer entrants, such as Anduril Industries Incorporated. Secretary Hegseth spoke about weapons acquisition reform at National War College in Washington, D.C., first explaining why the current system needs to be changed.
The defense industry financially benefits from our backwards culture. Schedule overruns, huge order backlogs, and too predictable cost increases become the norm. Our military and our taxpayers need a defense industrial base that it can count on to scale with urgency in a crisis, not one that is content to wait for money before taking urgent action. This relates to the whole industrial base, and most importantly, to the large primes that we do business with today. These large defense primes need to change to focus on speed and volume and to invest their own capital to get there. If we do that, the Department of War is, of course, big-time supportive of profits. We are capitalists, after all. But if they do not, those big ones will fade away. We've all heard this sort of talk before. Transformation of our acquisition process is a war of attrition, a war that we intend to win. Day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. I'm telling you, Feinberg and Duffy won't stop.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at National War College. The National News Desk writing about his speech, Hegseth is pushing for the Pentagon to focus on smaller, faster contracts rather than multi-year projects that develop fighter jets, aircraft carriers, and tanks. More from the speech.
Our objective is simple. Transform the entire acquisition system to operate on a wartime footing, to rapidly accelerate the fielding of capabilities and focus on results. Our objective is to rebuild the arsenal of freedom. American industry and its innovative spirit are begging to be unleashed to solve our most complex and dangerous warfighting problems. We need to get out of our own way, out of your way, and enter into real partnership with you, rather than overprescribe and decelerate your natural progress. In turn, industry needs to perceive business with the Department of War from the perspective of growth and assume risk to partner with the United States.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at National War College at Fort McNair in Washington, D.C. The New York Times reported earlier this week it has been nearly 3 weeks since dozens of legacy outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the 3 major broadcast news networks, Fox News and Newsmax, surrendered press passes that gave their journalists access to the Pentagon. They did so after declining to sign on to new rules that, according to many media lawyers, curb their First Amendment rights to report on the military. Many of those outlets have continued aggressive coverage of the military from outside the Pentagon since then. In their place, a fresh crop of news media has stepped forward to occupy the Pentagon's tightly circumscribed press areas, ones with a strikingly different philosophy when it comes to traditional journalistic notions about the Fourth Estate and holding truth to power. That was from the New York Times. This issue was discussed today at the Military Reporters and Editors Conference in Washington. The panel had 4 Pentagon reporters who did turn in their credentials rather than agree to the new policies. First, Tom Bowman with NPR, and then Tony Capaccio from Bloomberg News.
We were all there that day, probably 60, 80 of us, I would guess, everyone turning their badges in. And it was really kind of a sad day, I would think. It was almost like the end of college, and we're not going to see each other again kind of thing. There were some tears, people hugging. And also the press officers were upset. It's like it's not going to be the same without you guys around here anymore. So they were, some of them more upset, I think, than we were. But the bottom line is there's no way any of us, the responsible press, we're going to sign that document that basically says you cannot solicit information from people in the Pentagon. You know, I mean, just no one is going to do that. And I'll tell you a funny story. A couple of weeks ago, I was at Romanian Armed Forces Day at the Army-Navy Country Club. And, you know, I'm reaching out more to the embassies now because, you know, you have to find out what's going on. That's one place to go. And there was a sea of uniforms from all over the world. There was the Ukraine military attaché, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania. And I was standing there drinking some Romanian red wine, and this guy walks up and introduces himself, Chinese military attaché. And perfect English. And he's basically, this is his second tour here. He said, I've been to 35 states. I said, what's your favorite area? And he said, Boston. I said, I'm from the Boston area. So we're just chatting, and then he says, well, what's this news about this Pentagon press policy now? Tell me about it. I said, basically, it says we can't do our jobs. We basically can't call people at the Pentagon to find out what's going on. We basically have to wait for them to give us information, and then we're supposed to print it. He said, oh, just like us.
And anyone else can jump in. Where did this initially come from? Was this retaliation for maybe coverage of the Iran strikes or anything like that? Or is this a culmination of just decades of fighting against the fake news media?
No, this was Pete Hegseth, vengeful because of the coverage he received leading up to his nomination hearing. He wanted to kick NBC out right away. His wife wanted him to kick NBC out right away. Mm-hmm. His lawyer said, you can't do that. This is part of a mission on his part to squeeze the media out. You know, it started with the famous moving out CNN and NBC in February. That was cover because they wanted to kick NBC out and they couldn't do it. So that was top cover. Mm-hmm. And then it was a memo on the Pentagon briefing room that you couldn't go in and do stand-ups or even just go use the internet. Mm-hmm. And then there was the incremental, the May squeezing of where you can walk in the building. And then there was the memo of September 9th at 4:50 p.m. I know this clearly because we were going off to see damn Yankees at 5:30. And it's very clear. Then it began that month-long back and forth between the lawyers, and it culminated in the walkout.
Tony Capaccio from Bloomberg News and Tom Bowman with NPR. The 2 other Pentagon reporters on this panel at the Military Reporters and Editors Conference, who also gave up Pentagon media badges instead of signing on to the new procedures, Mallory Shelbourne with the U.S. Naval Institute, and Aaron Mehta of Breaking News.
The solicitation piece is obviously one of the scariest parts. I mean, you know, many of us go to a lot of military conferences. Does giving your business card to a service member, does that qualify as solicitation? I don't know. The guidance was vague enough that I think nobody could say. As for the new Pentagon press corps, I think it's really important that we call it what it is. It is a propaganda arm. It is state-sanctioned media that they are seeking to control so that they can control the narrative. And, we all know that, it's a list of very far-right outlets, and I think it's important that we call that for what it is.
And just to note, again, when we say our Pentagon Press Association membership, that included all of the right-leaning outlets that have been in the Pentagon. So Fox said no, Newsmax said no, the Washington Times said no. This is not a partisan issue at its core. This is about the ability to do our jobs, and more importantly, that job is, and this is the key thing, not about us being able to say, hey, we get to go to the Pentagon, isn't this cool? It's about the fact that we're providing information to both the public and to the military when they can't get information from the people in charge.
Aaron Mehta of Breaking News and Mallory Shelbourne from the U.S. Naval Institute at today's Military Reporters and Editors Conference in Washington, D.C. The group's Vice President, Jed Judson, with Defense News, said at the start of the conference that, unlike previous years, no military official would be speaking on the record, and even an off-the-record panel that had been planned with public affairs officers from the military branches has been canceled by the Pentagon. Next Tuesday, November 11th, is Veterans Day, and yesterday, November 6th, The Hill and News Nation held a Veterans Voices Summit. Their description opens with this: in deeply partisan times where Republicans control all branches of government, veterans' issues represent one of the few bipartisan topics left in Washington. Several members of Congress took part. Jack Bergman, Republican from Michigan, is a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant General and member of the House Armed Services Committee. He spoke about veterans' health care.
So my passion for the VFW, I'm also a Legion member, and I pay more dues to local, veteran service organizations. The point is, we are a country of individual freedoms. Those freedoms have been fought for. And for the government to limit a veteran's freedom to choose who they want to do their claims, to do their paperwork, I believe is counter to the American ideal. The veteran needs to be able to have the choice to choose. What the government is supposed to do, especially the Veterans Administration, is make sure those who do those appeal work and claims work for the veterans are good, honest actors. So the Choice Act preserves the freedom for that veteran to make their choices to who they want. And if they want to pay money for it and are okay with that, great. But it also creates the environment and the specifics to hold bad actors accountable and the VA to accredit people. And if you're not accredited and you're not doing the right thing for the right reason, you can't do it. But that's the Veterans Administration role, is to provide that top cover for the veteran to make sure they're not getting hit by a bad actor. So that's what the Choice Act is all about. I'm not going to support anything anywhere that limits an individual's freedom in our country. I don't care whether it's a veteran or not. So to me, it's not a thing where you've got the VSO against, if Jack's Mighty Fine Claim business was doing a good, honest business. Tell you what, I've got some spectacular companies that have come into our office and sat down, and I've grilled them, still will. What's your plan? What do you serve? How do you serve the veteran? But remember, the Veterans Administration is supposed to serve the veteran, not serve itself.
Congressman Jack Bergman, Republican of Michigan, at the Veterans Voices Summit hosted by The Hill and News Nation. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan, Democrat of Pennsylvania, was also there. She's an Air Force veteran, sits on the Armed Services Committee, and is founder and chair of the Service Women and Women Veterans Congressional Caucus.
And in my subsequent life was a lot of systems implementations and a lot of problems that we have in the transition between active duty and veterans is systemic, literally, whether we're transferring medical records from one area to the other or making it kind of easy for somebody to be able to access veteran care. We don't make that easy, and I think we're getting better at it. I think we're creating systems that speak with each other more and more, but that's taken way longer than it ought to. The civilian economy already has this kind of stuff figured out. My brother is a Army vet, and he lives in Iowa, not close to a veterans hospital. And when he and I were speaking about his needs, we went on the website to try to access, how he could find care, and it was impenetrable, and he and I are not dumb. Between us, we have several degrees and graduate degrees, and we can't figure out how to make sure that where his care comes from and where he should be going. That is not okay.
Yeah. My brother is a nurse, a civilian, but
my brother too.
Yeah, he worked at Schofield Barracks in Honolulu, near Honolulu, and on Oahu, with traumatic brain injury and PTSD patients, and he described a lot of the frustrations that you're describing or you're outlining. When it comes to access to care as well, that were expressed by many of those patients too.
Well, think about it. You're talking about people with brain injuries, you're talking about people who have suicidal ideations, and you're asking them to do impossible tasks online to prove that they need help when time is of the essence, and they don't have the time or the capacity in some cases to be able to be self-advocates.
Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan, Democrat of Pennsylvania, interviewed by Mike Vaquera, Washington Bureau Chief, News Nation, at the Veterans Voices Summit hosted by News Nation and The Hill on Thursday. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we go, a reminder that C-SPAN's Ceasefire airs tonight at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. This week, the guests are former Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel and former Democratic National Committee Chair Donna Brazile. The host, Dasha Burns, will lead a bipartisan discussion about Tuesday's election results, the potential impact of the 2026 midterms, and increasing partisanship. C-SPAN's Ceasefire, tonight, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Have a good night and weekend.